me on your schedule today.
Mhm.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're excited that you're here with us,
Me on your schedule.
wherever you are. And we are looking forward to um, our Monday schedule today because we are talking about business structure and things that businesses can do. I know those of you who are joining us via a replay, you're just seeing the portion that you see when we stream, but we have had a whole conversation before now. Let me just say, and I want to bring you into the conversation because I think it's really important for us to kind of keep up with some of the current events and things that are happening in the industry. And, I want to talk a little bit about, what it is that people are experiencing, in business and how, things are, transpiring, not just since the pandemic, but um, the state of entrepreneurship, sometimes it happens, to um, change based on, of course, what's happening, in the landscape uh, of the entire world, and so we talked about this a little bit before, and how um, unfortunately, even though, wars are happening in another country, sometimes it affects what's happening in this country. And so we want to really dive deeply into, what a person can do that started a business and everything was going really well when they started. And then all of a sudden they find themselves in a situation where they're not sure why their resources they seem like they're drying up, or it seems like things are changing. And so we'll talk about entrepreneurship as a whole, but then we'll talk about industry specifics, that might, give you a little bit of a different view um, of what it is that you've been, trying to deal with, daily. Okay. Because sometimes things go up, sometimes they go down. There's seasonal things that happen that may affect your industry. And so we really want to, just take a look at it, from the standpoint of, how do we navigate a landscape that is constantly changing, and what can we do as business owners to stay relevant, to create, an opportunity for a future-proof business if there's a possibility in our industry, and what can we do if we find out that we need to pivot? How can we make that pivot? And so this is a really important broadcast today. And I do want you to understand that, we are so intentional about making sure that we open up these conversations, because it's very important for people to not end up succumbing to the statistics of 50% of our businesses going out of business within the first 5 years. So, let's kind of talk about the state of entrepreneurship. And I want to share an article that actually was put out on the internet through the Washington Post in September of last year by Abha Batarai. And I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see it, because I want, to really, I'm going to read it for you. And although I know you could probably get the link, and you might even would go and read it, but, I just want to, bring it out today because I think it's important. So American entrepreneurship is on the rise. Okay. This is good news, right? In a post-pandemic shift, more people are starting and running their own businesses, a new study finds, but more businesses are closing too. Okay, and so let's kind of look at what the issue is here. So here we see this pedestrian, looking at businesses, buildings, housing Black-owned businesses in the Greenwood area in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And this is in 2020, and I want to tell you that I don't have time to do it today, but I want to show you some of the craziness that I've been finding while I've been doing my research, because, I'm a business strategist at heart, and so I have to do the research. I'm constantly writing, and what I'm writing, most recently has to do with businesses and entrepreneurship. And interestingly enough, in the city of Oakland, California, there are streets that are completely empty. The businesses have gone away. I mean, just empty buildings, empty buildings, empty buildings. And I've seen this in some other areas as well. But because I've been doing some studies on what's happening in the Northern California area, and we've been going back and forth to the Northern California area, some of what we're seeing is just horrific. And we're seeing it in Southern California, where we have a lot of people sleeping on the streets and under tents and in boxes. And that's just, a very difficult thing to see, but it's more difficult to watch people who were in business, that could give jobs to some of the people who are now homeless, no longer have their businesses. And so that's a real issue. So let's see what, the Washington Post is saying. Americans are starting and running their own businesses at record rates, part of a post-pandemic shift toward entrepreneurship led by women and people of color, according to a new report. Nearly 1 in 5 adults, 19%, are in the process of founding a business or have done so in the past 3.5 years, according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, an annual report by Babson College released Thursday. This is the highest level since the survey began in 1999. Okay, so let's see what the numbers are looking like. It says we're seeing an upward trend in entrepreneurship that's continued throughout the pandemic, and that's really a great sign, a really great sign, says Donna Kelly, a professor at Babson College and the report's lead author. It means businesses are introducing innovation, creating jobs, and contributing to the competitiveness of the United States. And so these numbers here, show us the percentage of Americans who have started a business in the last 3.5 years. And, in 2013, it was at 8%, and it went down to 7% in 2014, 15, 7%. And then all of a sudden in 2016, it was up again to 9%. Then it went down, and we had this great surge in 2019, but that was in January, and which was really a little bit before we knew what was going on with the pandemic. And then of course we had a depletion a little bit, from 11% down to 9%, but now it's on its way back up. However, the total entrepreneurial activity has increased. And so whereas it was at 13% in 2013, it has actually gone up to 19%, as it states in the article here. And that is kind of a very interesting surge, because even right at the beginning of in January of 2019, the total entrepreneurial activity was at 17%, and it dropped in 2020 to 15%. But, coming out of the pandemic, people were really starting businesses and staying in businesses, as it seems. Globally, the United States has the third largest entrepreneurship rate among 21 high-income economies, lagging behind the United Arab Emirates, Dubai, okay, and Saudi Arabia, but ahead of Canada and the United Kingdom, researchers found. Okay, so let's kind of take a look at some of the other things, though, that this article brings out. The recent surge builds on the momentum that began early in the pandemic, when sudden job losses spurred many to branch out on their own. Applications for new businesses spiked to an all-time high in July 2020, when more than 550,000 Americans filed paperwork to start their own companies, census data shows. A boost in government funding in the form of stimulus checks, extra unemployment benefits, and small business loans gave many people the financial cushion to get started. And some of us are aware that people who also got the PPP loans and EIDL loans, some of them use those loans to either expand their current operations or if they were in a situation where they had just started a business, they were able to utilize those funds to, begin to grow their business at a different kind of rate, much higher than what they would have been able to do on their own without those funds. And so we had COVID, we had the great resignation, and whenever there are tremendous job losses, it's natural for folks to go out on their own and start a business, said Kathy Corman Fry, director of the Center for Entrepreneurial Excellence at George Washington University. Since then, business registrations have remained well above pre-pandemic levels. A robust recovery combined with extra savings and steady consumer spending have helped encourage new waves of entrepreneurship. Now let's take a look at that, because I want to talk about what some states did to bring all of these businesses into the entrepreneurial landscape. Well, California gave people the opportunity to start LLCs without making that $70 payment. It was free to get started. And some other states had similar, options where people could start, for a lot less than what they used to have to pay to get started in business. There were other, wonderful, infusions of capital that people were giving out. I know at that time when the pandemic started, we were in Texas more than we are in Texas now. And while we were there, we actually changed to a different office. And in changing to that office, we were able to get into the office free of charge. And we had a very, very low rent for, a couple of months, and we were able to add other offices, right away, but of course, there were a lot of other complexities because as soon as we got those offices, we had a shutdown, and there were lots of other things that happened to not just us, but other people in business. And so even though we were all able to get started, some of us struggled for a while, during the pandemic because we didn't have the people coming in to patronize our businesses them in the manner that we had expected. There were some companies, if they were in retail, of course, people couldn't go to the stores as much, so they went online. They were able to take advantage of, online shopping, and they pivoted to other forms of, some people even went into doing the shopping by text. Okay. We saw a lot of people connect to the Afterpay and Klarna and some of these other models, because they needed to make sure they could split the payments for people and they could make larger purchases. And with the advent of the stimulus payments, people had a little bit more money in their pocket for a shorter period of time, during that time that they did not have to concern themselves about paying back. And so that caused, some a little bit of a surge in spending, that we were able to see. But a lot of the smaller businesses did not necessarily see a change there. And let's kind of take a look at what the data is showing. But experts say many small businesses founded in recent years may be reaching a critical turning point. Economic uncertainty, higher costs, and a slowdown in consumer spending have created new challenges for nascent companies. Business closures ticked up last year to 5.2% from 2.9% in 2019, researchers found. It's easier to get started, but maybe not so easy to keep business growing, Kelly said. That's a challenge we need to look at more. Do we need more training, access to finance? How do we ensure businesses can outlast their initial startup phase? So what I am looking at right now is that, we've been talking a lot about what businesses can do and how they can, create their processes and procedures, and how they need to have their standard operating procedures posted so they can get themselves, out of positions where they have so many dependencies. And we've talked about, making sure that you have the teachable, valuable, repeatable processes that, are in your business so that you can better have succession, having the ability for people to, step up to the plate when it's time for you to move on to doing something different or doing something, like sitting as chairman of the board. Okay. How do we make sure that our businesses are sustainable and stable? And these are all the kinds of questions that we've been answering over the last few weeks. And so I wanted to really help us to see the landscape and see what's really going on right now, because, after the first of the year, there were lots of more people starting more businesses, but the people who had been in business were seeing some challenges. So let's look here and see what, Cheryl Shao, a Boston area dentist, is saying. Cheryl Shao, a Boston area dentist, has spent the past 2 years designing a device that's a mix between braces and clear aligners, but it's been tough. Many of Shao's partnerships fell through during the pandemic, and although she's won multiple pitch competitions and been a part of 2 startup accelerators, it's been a struggle to secure the money she needs. She spends 40 hours a week fundraising, she said, and hopes to begin selling the product next year. We work a lot with inventors and people who are creating products, and some of our inventors are seeing some of the same issues, in the area of funding, not having adequate opportunities, to really dig in deep. And during the pandemic, we lost a lot of time for lots of reasons, but there's some things that we have to really start thinking about when we're in this situation. Another person, I'm a double minority, Asian and woman. Well, we're still on Cheryl here, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about this other person that we have been working with that's experiencing some of the things that Cheryl has experienced. But I'm a double minority, Asian and a woman, which has made it much harder to find funding, said Shao, 36. I kind of fell into entrepreneurship. I had this idea and was excited by the opportunity to really change orthodontics on a bigger scale. But now I'm dedicating all my time to raising enough money to make this a reality. Now, I want to just kind of talk about the fact that we have another person that's very similar to Cheryl. She was already in the process, though, of creating something, at the beginning of the pandemic, and she was far enough along that she absolutely had things already to manufacturing. And for that reason, I believe that she experienced a little bit more success than some of the other people that we have seen, because she was already a little bit further along. But then at some point, because of supply chain, not being able to get certain amounts of the materials necessary to create the product, there was a little bit of a stalling there. We have another client who at the beginning of the pandemic, had completely already, built out his wonderful, wonderful product. And then he couldn't get resistors. He couldn't get some of the other components that were needed, at the price point. And so we had to be really creative about, what we could recommend, and helping him to really see how he could find another supplier. And so what we're seeing is that there were really a lot of things that people experienced. And even though we're adding nearly 500,000 new businesses a month, there are still people who struggle, for many different reasons. For minority groups in particular, starting a business has become a promising alternative to traditional employment. Entrepreneurship rates are highest among Black and Hispanic adults, 35% and 27% respectively, compared with 15% of white adults, the report found. Other marginalized groups, such as formerly incarcerated Americans and those with criminal records, are also more likely to be entrepreneurs, according to Kylie Juan Huang, an assistant professor at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Oftentimes, when we think of entrepreneurship, we're thinking of high growth tech startups, she said. But a lot of entrepreneurship we're seeing comes from the fact that marginalized people continue to face difficulties in employment, not just in finding work, but in moving up. Latavia Thomas quit her job at AT&T during the pandemic and moved back in with her parents in Long Beach, California. She suffered from depression and said it was difficult to get out of bed most days, much less feeling motivated and to return to a 9-to-5 office job. So, and I'll let you guys read the rest of the article, but what I want to do right now is I want to talk a little bit about, well, how do we know when it's time for us to stay the course or, move on to something else? And so another article that um, is here from Entrepreneur Magazine, that was brought to me, via one of the classes that I'm taking right now in business feasibility. It's quite interesting. This is from 2011, and it's by a gentleman by the name of Eric Rice, who wrote the book, The Lean Startup. And I talked a lot about the book earlier on last month, because I really do believe in the lean method. I think it's an extremely good way to get started in business, but one of the concepts that he has is, do we pivot or persevere? The key to startup success. Perseverance can be overrated as an entrepreneur trait, he says. Knowing when to change course to test out a new approach might be even more important. And so what I learned in taking a look at this is that there are sometimes many reasons why things are not working or they don't seem to be working. And sometimes it is really seasonal, or it could be that there's something going on in the market, or something happens with technology, and because of an increase in a certain type of technology, it makes it difficult for you in your business to continue doing what you're doing because the industry has changed. Some of you guys who were with us on last week, Thursday, you noticed that I talked a little bit and brought out some technology that we took a look at. And we talked about how, during that time of the way that things were moving, in some ways we had to pivot to, instead of actually providing a course or teaching someone, about how to do business, we taught them how to use AI, okay? Because when AI became more prevalent and easier for people to adopt, it was really important that people understood how to write prompts, how to get the best out of your AI tools. AI could be used to decrease the need for human interaction in certain parts of your business, which could also increase your bottom line. If you're paying a contractor or a vendor to do certain things that AI could do for you, then you could take that same contractor or vendor and have them do some other things that might be a little bit more important to your business, or it may even reduce the need for the vendor relationships, because if you are able to teach the people that are working on your team, smaller team, but more impact because of the fact that they have better tools, then that makes a lot of sense. So we pivoted to being able to show people how to use AI and use it better, because we really believe that it was something that was going to, create an opportunity, for our company. And the thing that I want to really say here is that, so that people are able to really, grasp this, is that understanding, that sometimes that it's not the time to, stay the course. Sometimes it is the time to really kind of look at, okay, what is it that we can do different? Because if you stay the course and it was a time in which you should have made a turn or pivoted, you could miss an opportunity, or for that matter, cost your company a lot of money, And so Eric Rice, even in this article, he talks about there is no bigger destroyer of creative potential than the misguided decision to persevere. Companies that cannot bring itself to pivot in a new direction on the basis of feedback from the marketplace can get stuck in the land of the living dead, neither growing up enough to no dying, consuming resources and commitment from employees and other stakeholders, but not moving ahead. So, it's really a challenge, for you to sometimes give up something that you have, staked your life on. This was a concept that was really moving in a right direction, you thought, and then you get there and you find out that, woe is me, and now here you have a real challenge of not being in a position to utilize, all of the tools that you've and capital and for that matter, in, even education, sometimes training, in an area that is not yielding you any funds. Okay. Let me give you an example of what that could look like. When um, uh, at the beginning of the pandemic, we really thought that we would have an opportunity with the Department of Labor to provide training. And we were in talks to provide some very interesting kinds of training that they had not been doing before. And at that time, we were, in the process of bringing a level of instructional design to the landscape of training for apprenticeships that had not been in that industry previously. And this is before I did my Master of Science degree in instructional design, but it was something that, it was just in me that I really believed that we could bring a level of course content to the training that just was not there. We weren't seeing it. Simulations. We had all the thoughts in the world, and we spent money, to get people trained to learn how to use the technology and to learn, ourselves what it is that we needed to do. And at the time I was really I was getting an MBA. So I hadn't yet embarked upon the Master of Science degree yet, but I was right in the middle of my MBA when this thought, came to me that, we could take all of our in-person opportunities online. And if we did that, I really wanted to understand what it would look like, how much would it cost, and, where could we go? Well, as we were doing that, remember, we were already in talks with the Department of Labor, and we were really just, saturating our whole business with the concept of we were going to be the premier person to train people how to do the apprenticeship trainings. And we actually were going to establish a community center where people who were going to be, doing these trainings were going to come in person to do this. And then the pandemic, and then the shutdown, and everything that we were in talks about. Even though we were moving more towards online, doing the trainings online, we were planning to train the people to set up everything that they were going to be setting up for their companies in person. And we were not prepared for that. We had 7 offices, we had a training room, we had all of these things that we had, spent money and time and energy. We had televisions up on the wall that we were going to use for the training. And we had received a lot of donations that were going to help us to move in this direction. And at some point, it was just really in me. I wanted to persevere because I had been working so hard on this with the Department of Labor, and they were just, constantly sending me emails, you guys can do this. We can see you through it. We have resources, but then we got an email from them saying that they wanted us to fund it for 5 years. And I'm like, oh, so now we have these 7 offices that was costing us a lot of money, and you want us to fund the project for 5 years, which would not have been a problem because we could have gotten a grant, we would have fundraised, we've done all of those things, but we were in a shutdown. And so a lot of what we could have gotten a grant to do, we could not substantiate the purpose of it. The grants that we were getting on our desk were, how can we keep going what you had going, not how can we help you start something new. So we did get funding, and we got funding to help people take their businesses online, to help them transition. Okay. We got funding, or not just funding, but we also received, lots of technology funding, which wasn't actual cash. It was giving us access to using other types of softwares, but it was not enough for us to create that program. So as much as I wanted to persevere, I had to pivot. Okay. And so I want to really understand, from your side, what you're looking at, if you want to put it in the chat, or if you want to, raise your hand and share if you're on Zoom, I mean, because I know that this was a really a hard place for us. And I don't know if anyone else has faced that, where you had to make a decision to, abandon some of the things that you were working on, even if you had to shelve it, for a time frame. Sometimes you couldn't come back to doing the way that you did it before because some things were no longer relevant or the technology had outpaced what you were doing, and so sometimes this is a real challenge, and I don't know if anyone has experienced it, but he talks about startup productivity is not about cranking out more widgets or features. It's about aligning our efforts with a business and product that are working to create value and drive growth. In other words, successful pivots put us on a path toward growing a sustainable business. And so you heard me talk about the concept in context, the idea of sustainability. What is it that we can do to create an opportunity for ourselves over time that future proofs our business, and when I say future proof, I don't mean that the one service that you're offering is going to be the same service that you're offering, in 20 years, because of things that change, you have to change. And there are some real opportunities that can happen even when things are changing. He says failure is a prerequisite to learning. And I really do believe that failing, oh my gosh, where are you, Crystal? Because Crystal has an amazing, I don't know if she's still on, but she has an amazing concept of failure. And it looks like that she's jumped off for a moment, but we'll have to have her on, another day to, talk about her concept of what failing means. Okay. Because when I heard her say this, it was just, I mean, really a powerful concept. But our goal for failure is that you don't ever want to make the destiny of failure that you fail, right? The destiny of failure is not that. You can use failure in so many different ways. And we've talked about the fact that the reason why people are able to create many of the things that they create is because they have the concept of the failure rate being what it needs to be. So the problem with the notion of shipping a product and then seeing what happens is that you're guaranteed to succeed at seeing what happens, okay? But then what? As soon as you have a handful of customers, you're likely to have 5 opinions about what to do next. Which should you listen to? A pivot requires that we keep one foot rooted in what we've learned so far while making a fundamental change in strategy in order to seek even greater validated learning. And that is absolutely the truth because, I'm working on a new concept right now for one of our businesses, and we had to do a plan to pivot. What would we see if we couldn't do exactly what we were planning to do? What if there was another pandemic and we could not serve people the way that we had planned to serve them? How would we enter the market then? Or for that matter, if we were already in the market and something occurred where we would not be able to be in person, how would we be able to shift everything so that our clients would not lose in the process of the change? So ask most entrepreneurs who have decided to pivot, and they will tell you that they wish they had made the decision sooner. There are 3 reasons why this happens, and before I share these 3 reasons, let me just tell you, our entire company and the manner in which we serve people right now is a result of a pivot. We pivoted in an industry. We didn't necessarily pivot in business. We pivoted in an industry and started a new business because of the fact that there were things at the time that precluded us from being able to be as successful and serve people as well in the old company. So it's very interesting that when you see these pivots, sometimes you don't see the backstory. And because you don't see the backstory, you don't really understand why people made the choice that they made. But let's look at the 3 reasons why, people really think they should have made the decision sooner. Vanity metrics can allow entrepreneurs to form false conclusions and live in their own private reality. So what are vanity metrics? Well, let's talk about it. Vanity metrics are like, what sometimes we see in social media, or for that matter, because we're looking at how many people came to our website, okay? Well, if they come to the website and they don't purchase, okay, yes, it's getting you before more people, but really, how is that helping you to understand, your ability to keep a customer longer, or get a customer sooner? I mean, are you able to really see that, from just looking at the metric of how many people visited your website? When an entrepreneur has an unclear hypothesis, it's almost impossible to experience complete failure. And without failure, there is usually no impetus to embark on the radical change a pivot requires. Until we failed at something, we did not have the ability to understand how much we needed to do something else. Okay. And that is very, very true. And so yes, you can quote me on that, but until you fail at something, you don't know, how much you need to make that change. And I would say this, for me, I look at failure very different, because if something is not working and I see a trend where there's some things happening where our numbers are going down and they're continuing to go down, and or they're going down every 3 months or going down every 4 months, I start looking at what happened right before the trend. Okay. What's happening in the industry? What's happening in the world? What is it that's going on that has contributed externally, and then what's happening inside the company that's contributing, internally to these changes, and what is it that we can do, if there's anything to continue to persevere, that if there's a situation where we really believe that that what we're doing is what we should be doing. But if we really believe that what we're doing is what we should be doing, and it maybe is something that we need to do, differently, so that we can continue doing it, that's a different thing altogether. And so that considers, taking a look at it from all angles. And then that might be a ditch this the way we're doing it and do it differently, which is a pivot. Okay. 3 says many entrepreneurs are afraid. Acknowledging failure can lead to dangerously low morale. Most entrepreneurs' biggest fear is not that their vision will prove to be wrong. More terrifying is that thought that the vision might be deemed wrong without having been given a real chance to prove itself. And that is really true, because, in the back of your mind, you're saying, I know I can do this. I know I can do this. I can understand what's going on right now, and sometimes we'll pray and it's like, Father, show me, or if, it might be a discussion that you're having with someone. I really need to see this. I can't understand why I'm not seeing, the numbers come in, or why I'm not seeing my company at the higher end of the scale, or why we're not able to capture the market share. Entrepreneurs need to face their fears and be willing to fall, or fail, I should say, and fail fast, often in a public way. In fact, entrepreneurs who have a high profile, either because of personal fame or because they are operating as part of a famous brand, face an extreme version of this problem. The decision to pivot requires a clear-eyed and objective mindset. It typically is emotionally charged for any startup and has to be addressed in a structured way. And so I know that we recently were talking about, how a person can innovate or iterate, upon on their current services, and what it is that you can do to get the knowledge, from your customers, so you'll know what it is that their needs, require, or how you can better serve them. We talked about being able to, go into market research with your company, focus groups and polls and surveys, and there are all types of other ways that you can gather data to get an understanding of how you could better meet the needs of the customer. But internally, your team can also be a very good resource that can share with you the tools that you might need to make these kinds of decisions. And so let's look at the end of the article and see what it is that Eric is saying here. One way to mitigate this challenge is to schedule the meeting in advance. And so he's talking about, really taking advantage of, the concept of pivoting and persevering. He recommends that every startup has a regular pivot or persevere meeting. In his experience, he says less than a few weeks between meetings is too often, and more than a few months is too infrequent. Each startup has to find its own pace. But the thing that I want you to realize is that until you get to this place where you have this meeting, some of us call it a come to Jesus meeting, where you're able to look at it and say, okay, we've been doing this way for X amount of time, and we've not, really seen the growth, the sustained growth that we thought we would see. What could we do different, to change those numbers? Are we, looking at our customers in the right way? Did we do the empathy process, to really see how we can serve them better? What is it that we need to do to really create, the best possible company for the customers that we serve? And so I really do suggest that you get the Lean Startup book. I've shared with you, and let me see if I can find my copy. Yep, here it is. Okay. And I'm almost through it now, but let's see, here we go. I suggest you get it because it is a really good book that does help entrepreneurs to see how they can use continuous innovation and create a radically successful business. And he wrote the book, and I believe that, he created an entire platform around it because the method itself works. So the book itself is just a wonderful way of helping you to get in the mindset of using the strategies inside of the book, to change your company, to change your mindset about running a company so that you can really experience the benefits and the freedom of that entrepreneurship, can provide you. Well, this has been Patience Rose with Co-working Live with Red Worldwide, and I do thank you for joining with us today, and I look forward to you being with us tomorrow as we talk more about legacy. But I want you to, understand that if you're experiencing something in your business that does not look like at all what you were expecting, do realize that it may be time for you to have that meeting, the Pivot or Persevere meeting, where you decide, whether or not it's the right time for you to stick to it, or, shelve that concept and move to something else that could be more valuable and causing you to have a more sustainable process in your company.